So, to get us kicked off here, I'm going to start at my left. Can each of you just give us maybe like a 2-sentence overview, who you are, where you work, what you do?
Hi everybody, I'm Jamon Holmgren. I am co-founder and CTO of Infinite Red. You may have seen me before, but I'm also obviously one of the organizers of Chain React. I am on the React Native open source core team. We're active in the React Native community. Work on Ignite, Reactatron, other open source. And I don't actually do a ton of React Native day-to-day because I manage teams of React Native developers, but I work on tooling a lot. And I have built React Native apps, but it's just not a day-to-day thing. So my perspective is going to be more along the lines of tooling and supporting React Native developers. Was that 2 sentences?
So many more than 2 sentences.
Get used to it.
Hey, my name's Becca. I am a front-end engineer at an engineering agency called Assemble. I've actually been at this conference for 3 years, but this is my first year attending as a developer. My background is in marketing, and I made the switch to becoming a developer in this past year, so I'm excited to be here. Oh, thank you, thank you. So yeah, I'm excited to be here kind of representing the new developer and the developer who's newer to React Native.
Hi, my name is TJ Fallon. I've been an iOS engineer since 2010 and made the switch to React Native in 2015. Right now I manage the mobile teams at Skills. Just a quick plug, we're hiring in both Portland and San Francisco right now. If anybody's looking for a React Native job, please talk to me afterwards. I work on a product app that wraps games for competitive multiplayer gameplay.
Hi, my name is Laura Medalia, and I'm a tech lead at Haven, which is a healthcare venture started by Amazon, JP Morgan Chase, and Berkshire Hathaway. And I have been working with React Native for about 2 years in the product space, working in healthcare, so I'll be coming with a product perspective.
My name is Eli White. I'm a software engineer on the React Native core team at Facebook. I've been on the team a little over 2 years, came from a web background, and I've been working on a lot of the core architecture stuff, as well as helping product teams build like the highest quality and performant experiences they can.
Great. So I wanted to start off with a question that is probably not super helpful for them, but it's going to be very helpful for me. How would you explain React Native to a developer who hasn't done React Native? Let's start with Becca, actually, since you're going to be fresh eyes.
Sure. So I guess I would describe React Native as a framework for building mobile apps and also web apps and other kind of like Internet of Things related apps these days using kind of React syntax. And it's a way to kind of dive into mobile development without necessarily having a native background, though having a native background is certainly very welcome in React Native development.
Sure. Anyone have anything to add to that? I see there's like a thought happening.
I've always thought of React Native as a better alternative to Cordova or PhoneGap. It's an amazing way to build a cross-platform application and iterate on it very quickly. That's kind of my perspective on it.
And then I'll add the exciting thing, I think, is that you're able to be using React when developing, but ultimately what ends up happening is that the code that you're writing is going to be translated into native code that can run on a device, which I think is really exciting as well.
Cool. So kind of building on that, especially for those of you who've been working on React Native for a while, what would you say are the things that you're most excited about in React Native right now? Maybe Jamon, you want to kick us off?
I think that the thing that's the most exciting to me is the amount of investment that's happening with not just Facebook, although Facebook obviously, based on Hermes and the Hermes engine and everything, but the amount of investment that's happening outside of Facebook. There's Microsoft presence here, there's Amazon presence here, they were our platinum sponsor this year. And it seems like, you all are here, right? Like you're working for many different companies and they're investing in React Native. So for me, the thing that is exciting, I've worked on technologies in the past where there's an initial kind of hype, right? And like everybody got really excited about it, and a few people were early adopters, and I was probably one of them. And but then it sort of just died out, and the ship went down. And I don't think that's happening to React Native, because we're seeing just an incredible amount of investment happening into it. So that's more where I'm coming from, but also I'm very interested in the maturity of the tool chain getting better and better. We saw that with Mike's talk, where he's talking about the CLI and getting better this morning. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Maybe Eli, we haven't heard from you yet. What are you excited about?
I've been really happy with the growth in the community. Very similar to Jamon. I think seeing, as we've been doing a lot of the lean core effort and moving these modules out, the community has stepped up in a really big way to manage these modules. And these repos like WebView have received so many more pull requests and fixed so many bugs that have been so long outstanding that our team at Facebook hasn't been able to manage. And at the same time, as we've been moving all these projects out, we've gone from receiving 2 or 3 PRs a day to receiving 8 PRs a day on a smaller surface area. We've merged something like 600 to 800 pull requests in the last 6 months. It's totally different. But it's all of you that write them. We just hit merge. So don't give us too much credit. Thank you for writing that. Seeing the growth has been really cool.
Anything that's particularly exciting to you as you're coming into it?
I mean, honestly, I think just learning it. I think because I have worked primarily in web, being able to actually write mobile applications with a much lower barrier to entry is just really fantastic. So yeah, kind of just enjoying the whole ecosystem in general.
Yeah. And then TJ, Laura, you work on products. So is there anything that's particularly exciting now, kind of from your perspective?
But this is probably not from the product point of view, but just one thing that I would want to talk about is I feel like I appreciate that the React Native team has been showing a lot of their commitment too. I think, I don't know if people have seen surveys that they sent out recently being what are the pain points that you have? And then the community got really involved and talked about it, and then they went ahead and started to address the pain points. And I think that is really exciting to see, because it just shows how seriously they're taking it. And really makes us, or me, feel confident about investing in a technology for a product that I'm building, which is important.
Cool.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
So with this survey, I don't know if you guys saw it, I think we posted what do you dislike the most about React Native? And the thing that's super cool to me about that is that all of the responses, we just collected them and collated them and posted them, but then companies like CallStack went and actually did all the work to fix them, as well as a whole bunch of other people in the community. So we're trying to listen, but I think even just our approach of repeating back what we're hearing has shown other people where they can have the most impact in the community. I think people want to contribute, they don't know how. And I think it's our responsibility at Facebook to help you find the right ways to do that.
So I think that actually dovetails really nicely into a follow-up question, which would be, what are the things that you think are the biggest areas for growth or opportunities for growth in React Native? TJ, you and I were joking backstage that we needed to find the difference between complaining and feedback. So I'm going to put you on the spot to start off.
So I kind of have an odd perspective working on an SDK and working primarily in iOS for a number of years. I personally would really love navigation to be part of the core, but I think that I'm kind of alone in that, at least on this stage. That's one of my pain points. And generally just performance has gotten so much better over the years, but I think there's still room to go there.
Over here.
I actually want to follow up a little bit on the previous thing and say that I think this is one of the things that sets React Native apart from Flutter, I would say, is the involvement from the community. It is very much driven by the community. Now the core is definitely Facebook, and they're doing some amazing work and investing a ton in that. And I think that is appropriate for their role. But it's very community driven. I mean, the community releases React Native, and that's what we do. And it's a different approach with Flutter, but it's a sort of a differentiator.
I'd also like to say something that I really love about React Native, not just the bad parts. I am astounded by the web ecosystem that's out there. I had experience of porting Stanza.io to React Native to build a full-scale chat application that's used by tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of users. And that's just mind-blowing to me, and I love it. It's not something that was possible. The iOS ecosystem and the Android ecosystem are very isolated from each other. And I think React Native is kind of helping to pour some water on the fire that is the holy war between the two mobile communities. And I really love that and appreciate it.
Eli, I feel like you're going to have a little bit of maybe a lower level view of what's going on. Do you feel like there are any particularly big areas for growth or improvement where you'd love to see more people jump in and get involved?
So I think it was touched on earlier that Facebook has been we have been managing the core and bringing a lot of the performance improvements. I think one of the things that we are going to need to figure out is the third-party modules and making sure that those are very high quality and aren't just for an individual platform. One of the challenges is that if you're building a native module or custom component for React Native, you have to be familiar with JavaScript and iOS and Android to build something really high quality, unless you're working with others that can help balance that out. And so I think that's a place where we need to figure out how do we get these modules to be as high quality as we want and keep them maintained. And I think the React Native community has done a really big and great job of this. As we've separated out these modules, a bunch of people have stepped up. And Lorenzo talked about that in his talk yesterday. There's a whole bunch of movement happening on these, but there's still a lot of room for additional people like all of you to help contribute and make those even better.
Great. Have you hit any particular stumbling blocks as you've been learning React Native, like things that you feel trip you up or were just frustrating to get started?
Here and there. I think kind of initially some of the things that I was used to being very simple to do in React were not so simple to do in React Native. The one thing I can particularly think of is trying to put a custom font into my app and spending 2 hours on it and still not ever getting it working completely. So I think, it's a framework that's changing quite a bit, and I think sometimes the documentation will lag a little bit behind those changes. So that's probably been the area where I've had the biggest pain points learning.
Cool. Let's move on to something completely unrelated. So did y'all see that tweet from Dan Abramov about fast refresh mode? Okay. How cool is that?
Have you guys seen this tweet from Dan about fast refresh? Okay.
Does somebody want to explain what it is? Because I can't.
You can.
I can't.
Okay.
I definitely can't.
Fast refresh is a new replacement for both hot reloading and live reloading, and it works. Go figure. So hot reloading has been something that Dan Abramov has been it's been a personal challenge for him since he started. Hot reloading initially was created to demo Redux, and it was kind of like a hack on top, and it would fail in all of these cases. And now fast refresh is okay, how do we build this into the core of React and enable this for React Native? And to tell you how well it works, people at Facebook who've been trying this, they leave it on. That's it. They just leave it on. You can't do that with hot reloading. And if it reloads components, and if it can't for some reason, it bubbles up to the nearest error boundary and reloads the error boundary. You can change styles. You can change constants. If you have runtime exceptions, it'll keep going from that. It doesn't crash the app. It's exactly what you'd want, and it's really beautiful.
Has anybody else tried this yet? Have you worked with it at all? Is it released?
We run on master? I'm not sure.
Okay, same question. Has any of you tried this?
I have not.
Is it out? It's not out.
I haven't tried it either, but I do want to say that as having such a very deep React Native application that has hundreds of screens and 90% of what a user sees in the Skills platform is React Native. Getting that will save countless developer hours. It's just kind of incredible. It's mind-blowing.
Are there anything, so like with that being solved, sorry to cut you off, are there things beyond hot reloading in the developer experience that would make React Native a better make it easier to work with?
I think that certainly, talking about having more and better tooling around things like performance and debugging, and we know this. Infinite Red, of course, has put out Reactatron. Any of you use Reactatron out there? Awesome. Got some Reactatron. Last year, by the way, Darren Wilson, who works for Infinite Red, did a great talk on Reactatron. If you want to go look it up afterward, watch that talk. It was a lot of people really loved it, and it shows off sort of the power of Reactatron. So obviously, as React Native, we do mostly React Native. We do some React as well, but mostly React Native. We use Reactatron all the time. It's on all the time, and that's great. Like we need tools like that support React Native. Unfortunately, there are situations where maybe there's a company that does tooling of some sort, and they will have a React awesome, amazing dashboard or something like that. And then you get to React Native, and they'll have one person who likes React Native, who's probably here somewhere, and they're the one maintainer of the React Native side of it, right? And and that's unfortunate because then the support, it really suffers, and it makes it much more difficult for all of us to create performant and reliable apps. So I want to see more stuff on the tooling side of things for sure.
So the survey I talked about earlier, the 3 top voted problems were upgrading, linking, and debugging. And upgrading and linking have both, I won't say been solved, but are way better than they were when we did that survey. Unfortunately, you have to upgrade to 59 and 60 to kind of get those improvements, but after that, it should be a lot better. And I think debugging is another developer experience thing, and we have a great integration with Chrome for Hermes, being able to run that on device that should really help solve that. But I think overall, at least our team at Facebook has been so focused on performance and architecture recently, we've kind of taken our eye off the ball a little bit on developer experience, and the community has stepped up with things like Ignite. But I think we're starting to be able to shift our attention a little bit more back to developer experience. Even just things like what error messages say, and trying to help people fall into the pit of success. And so I hope that we have a lot more to share on that front over the next couple of months.
I have a follow-up, but first I want to give you both a chance because are there things in the product experience that, or really just in your day-to-day experience, that you would like to see in addition to the hot reloading?
Yeah, so one thing that I will say, and this is from somebody who came from the web world and then moved to mobile development, is that I hope to see more testing solutions for the React Native mobile application world, specifically around integration testing. I think my coworker Carly gave a great talk about screenshot testing and a solution for it, but I'd like to see more. Great.
So my follow-up, you talked a little bit about the upgrade path. You have to get to 59 and 60 to get that upgrade experience. What's going to be required for React Native to hit like what you would consider a stable 1.0? And this isn't necessarily, it's not necessarily a question for you as much as it's kind of like, what do y'all think is going to be required? What needs to exist before you could call it stable?
I want to start with other people.
Is it nobody? Should I just move on?
I'm happy to talk about it. So I think there's room for many valid perspectives here on this particular thing. And I understand the core team's approach where they're moving through a lot of breaking changes, right? So, and they have a few more kind of on the horizon that they want to make sure that they get out there, and they don't want the experience of React Native developers to be one of constant churn and be at, version 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, like just really quickly jumping through them. But we're already there. We already have them in production, right? We're not waiting till 1.0 before we release our apps. Well, at least most of us. So we're already feeling that churn, that one, 58, 59, 60, et cetera. So I'm actually okay, like whatever the the core team decides as far as 1.0. One thing I will add to this is that as a consultancy, we get clients who come to us and they're considering React Native. The competition isn't necessarily other agencies like CallStack or whatever. They're awesome, whatever. But the big thing is, do we do it in React Native at all? Like, do we just do it in native, like iOS and Android native? And they will look at React Native and say, well, you're not at 1.0 yet, so we can't go with that. That would be too risky. So there's a perception thing there that could affect this.
I have maybe a couple things on my wish list, but I think one of the big things that I would like to see changed or improved is some of the, and this is coming from a native iOS developer perspective of many years, some of the internal build process parts of the Xcode building the framework on iOS seem a little odd to me. Kind of installing dependencies as part of the compilation process, that's something that I would like to see modified in some way to be much more in tune with some of the great things that Apple has done with their developer experience. A couple other things, but they're mostly, I build an SDK, and you guys don't care about that.
So I think our feeling on a 1.0 is that we really hate that people feel like they have to tell other people, like, no, it's stable, I promise, even though it's not 1.0. That's not a great thing for you to have to do, and we could fix that as you identified. I think our team also is like pretty disappointed in ourselves in like how many breaking changes we've had to ship over the years that React Native has been around. The counter to that is that I also don't think React Native would be as good as it is today if we didn't do that. And so I think our team sees like a light at the end of the tunnel of when we think that like, okay, this is going to be like way more stable, and we'll be able to define this API and actually stick to it. In the world of following Semver, which we would, like we would not go to 1.0 and then be like, all right, we're not going to care about Semver. And so in a world where everything was baked into the core of React Native, if the slider component changed the definition of a prop and it was backwards incompatible, we'd have to like bump the major version of React Native, and like that kind of feels a little bit weird. And so lean core is going to help a lot to, if the core, the smaller the core is, the smaller the surface area is that affects the major version. And so our team is kind of hoping that with lean core and Fabric and Turbo modules, we'll have this kind of thing that we're very comfortable with, and it would make a lot more sense at that point to give you all the version number that you want from us.
A question that I'd like to ask is, so coming from the web world, right? One of the things that we often tell people is you don't need a native app. You could potentially build this as a progressive web app. And so there are, I think, really good arguments for both angles. And so what I'd be curious to hear is kind of if you could play devil's advocate against React Native, at what point would you actually recommend to someone, well, you should build a progressive web app? You want to start us off?
So the first thing that comes to mind, I mean, everything is a game of trade-offs, right? And like your particular use case. So I don't think there's ever going to be a right answer, but I would want to, if I was speaking to somebody about this, I would want to talk through like, they should understand what they can and can't access from like the native application. Like you can't get geofencing, you can't have access to to contacts or SMS, and for some people they might not need that, and they might care much more about SEO, which Google is going to reward you for having a progressive web app. And so there's a bunch of trade-offs like that, and so I would kind of just want to go through them and talk through them.
I should note that this question is sponsored by Gatsby. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think a few things to consider for me would be looking at kind of who your main audience is. I know progressive web apps are very helpful to have if you have a large audience who's using your app without super reliable internet access. Particularly, I think since so many developer hubs are in big cities, we can kind of lose sight of people who are using the internet and using different apps in different parts of the world. So that's a really big consideration, I think. And then coming from a marketing background, there's also things to consider like, well, do you want your app to be in an app store? If so, you should probably go with an actual native app, because as far as I'm aware, iOS does not currently support PWAs in their app store. And also, do you want features like push notifications that can kind of help increase user interaction? So those would be considerations that I would take into account when making a recommendation.
Do you have any opinion on this from the agency side?
Yeah, we get asked this question quite a bit. I'll keep this very short. I've talked a lot, but I think I'll believe PWAs when we get consistent requests. Right now we don't really. We get a few, but it's pretty few and far between.
Cool. So, keeping in mind that Brent is in attendance, what does everybody think about Expo? Go ahead.
I actually used to do agency work, like Infinite Red. If I was still doing agency work, that would probably be the main tool that I use. It's so easy to quickly iterate, and it solves a lot of the... I have to dive deep into the toolchain for working on an SDK, but working on individual apps and putting them out quickly, Expo seems to be the best solution out there to do that. Everything's so supported for you.
Yeah, oh, sorry. My first experiences trying to build for React Native were with Expo, and it definitely was very user-friendly for a beginner. I think where I ran into a few issues was, again, kind of around documentation. There were sometimes some things that didn't quite seem to line up, but largely I've found it delightful to use, to be perfectly honest.
Does anybody disagree with that? Like not to try to put anybody on the spot to be negative, but have you found things that you don't like, that where you get stuck or that you didn't like about using Expo?
Well, I mean, I don't know if this is fully where you're going, but one thing that I appreciate is that Expo, I think they have a web page that's literally like, why should I not use Expo? And there are a bunch of things that they list there that I think are really great reasons why it might not be the right fit for you. And so I think you're going to trade a little bit of flexibility for the amazing kind of runway that they give you, and some people can't work within that flexibility limit, so yeah.
We love Expo. React Native would not be what it is today without Expo. That is a huge accomplishment for what they've done and how it's been taken in by the community. I think some of the really awesome stuff they're doing recently. I don't know how many people have seen their web support? Cool. So their web support, they have this new beta thing where they use React Native Web, but when you create a new Expo project using the same code base, you can render to iOS, Android, and web. And this has been something that everyone has wanted for a very long time. And Expo is giving it a real shot. And I think we're going to learn a lot from that on the core team and in the community, and they're pitching in a lot of the native modules and making them have web support, as well as also recognizing that one of the biggest issues with Expo historically has been that you can't add your own native code. But with unimodules, which is their way to use Expo modules in non-Expo created apps, they're giving back a lot of what they've created to the community, and that's great citizens. React Native would not be where it is without them.
Yeah, I'm going to start with so Infinite Red historically has not used Expo very much for our client projects, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about that. When we started in October of 2015 using React Native, and Expo, throughout the first few years of building, it wasn't quite there for us. We found ourselves having to eject quite a bit when we would start. So what we built was Ignite. A lot of you have probably heard about Ignite and the boilerplate that we created. We've created a few versions since then. It's not based on Expo. It just starts with React Native init. There's literally a command that runs in React Native init. So whatever React Native init gives you, then we sugar, our stack on top of that. But I absolutely think Expo is the future of React Native. And the reason I think that is because they're an amazing team. They're awesome. Like, the Expo team is super cool. And they listen. They listen to our concerns about like where we couldn't use Expo. And they listen to the community in general, and they keep working at it, and they keep getting better. Unimodules is a perfect example of this. We were native developers before we started using React Native. And so for us, dropping down into native code was, that it felt comfortable to drop down and just, write some native code wherever we needed to, and we needed to a lot. So not having that escape hatch was, kind of the big thing. But I love the direction they're going, and what I really want to do is eventually get to where Ignite is not using React Native in it, it's using Expo, using the Expo CLI to create a new React Native app. And then we sugar our stack on top of that. You can build pretty much anything, and you can of course still eject. And then what Brent and I were talking about, when you do eject, it feels more like you're right into a React Native app, and it allows you to keep going from there. So yeah, very bullish on Expo, even though we haven't used it historically.
And go ahead.
I think I can provide like a slightly different perspective on Expo. I do really love it, and I've used so many things that Brent has written over the years. I'm so thankful for the work that they've done. But there were a few things you said while you were talking that reminded me of one of the riskier parts of the JavaScript ecosystem as a whole. How many people were hit by the whole left pad incident about a year and a half ago? Show of hands, anybody? Yeah.
A few out there.
And so that is one of the things that you have to take into account if you want to decide to use Expo or other tools that are being built in the React Native ecosystem right now. You are already one layer removed from the metal when you're using React Native, and then you add Expo, you're removed again, or other tools like that. So you do have to be aware that that can cause you pain. They do a wonderful job of making it painless, and it's getting better all the time, but it is something you should be aware of. Know that you're getting into that.
Great. Well, I have such a tangential thing I'm not going to ask. I'm going to stay on topic. Okay, instead, everybody's been too nice, so I'm going to ask a like Jerry Springer style question here. Which state management library is best and why?
So I'm originally from Cincinnati, so Jerry Springer references really resonate with me. I don't know if anybody knows, he was the mayor of Cincinnati for a while. I don't use one. We came from a brownfield world. We have a caching system based on HTTP headers and URLs, and we typically stick with more of an MVC pattern. Maybe that's because we were mostly native developers before we moved to JavaScript and haven't had that kind of thing interjected into our world. But that's where I come from.
You're coming in fresh. What do you think?
Well, I have a couple of really crazy tech hot takes, which are like, it depends, and use what you like. I would say though, like, I'm being newer, I haven't really had a chance to dive into like hooks too much, but what I've done a little bit has seemed really promising. I think in my experience using like Redux has largely been the most successful at being like persistent, but has a very large barrier to entry since it is complicated. My first week at my new job, I was on a project that used TypeScript, which I had never used before, and Redux, which I was not very good at yet. And it was just like, oh God, what is breaking what thing right now? So that was a struggle. I've also had good luck with context API, but I've found that in some cases, particularly if you're managing like login state or something along those lines, it doesn't always persist the whole way through. So you'll be, if you go like one particular particular route, you'll lose your state. So yeah, that's kind of been my experience so far. Again, I think it kind of just depends on what you're doing. So, yep.
Real spicy takes up here today. What do you think?
I mean, I agree. It depends on what you do and your unique product.
Y'all are
absolutely.
killing me. I thought we were
But-
going to be throwing chairs up here.
I know. I'll talk about my personal experience because I've had a really positive experience. When I first started working with React actually on the web, and the first React Native application I worked on, I was originally using Redux as well, and making a lot of RESTful API calls. So there was a lot of remote reading and writing, and then moved over to GraphQL, which is great for other reasons, but I won't rant about GraphQL right now, and used Apollo on top of it, and then found that actually, when moving to start using Apollo, actually most of the RESTful API calls that I was making and bringing into Redux were kind of replaced by Apollo, and it's been really great. It gives you error handling, loading state. It can handle caching for you and batching queries. So I've had a really positive experience with Apollo, and it's captured a lot of the application state management in the products that I've worked on.
Do you have a standard pattern for your state management, or is it
Yeah.
per project?
Yeah, so we use, of course, Ignite to create most of our new projects. And the first iteration of the boilerplate used Redux and Redux sagas. Because Redux doesn't totally solve the side effects side of it, so Redux Sagas was a good way to go. And we really liked it, and we used it for quite a while for quite a few apps. But one of the criticisms of Redux is, of course, how much boilerplate you have to write. There's just you have to touch many files, and you have to write lots of, they're maybe not complex altogether. It's a pretty straightforward pattern. I think someone said on Twitter that Redux is mainly just a good set of docs. Not really a library, and that's kind of true. However, with our next version of the boilerplate, we went a different direction, and we used a library called MobX State Tree. Does anybody use MobX State Tree? All right, we got some people out there. I think Redux is still by far, the thing that has the most adoption. But MobX State Tree, so MobX, there's MobX, and then there's MobX State Tree. MobX is sort of like the engine underneath it, and you have almost too much flexibility. MobX State Tree is like, hey, here's how to use MobX. So think of a MobX State Tree as being closer to a Redux pattern. What is really nice about MobX State Tree is how little code you write, and all of your state management is taken care of. That's the biggest thing about it. And it's very efficient, extremely efficient. It updates, if you make state changes, you don't have to worry about, a lot of things. It just takes care of it under the hood. And I would recommend, if you are considering using MobX State Tree, what you should do is hire, for a training session, Michel Westrate, who created it. I got a chance to meet him in Finland. He's fantastic. And I hired him to come and talk to my team, and he gave us an overview of MobX State Tree. And when you go away from that, you're going to be like, mind blown, this is awesome. So very, very cool. However, in the future, down the road, we're hoping eventually to go more where Laura is, which is with Apollo kind of taking care of things. You can use it with MobX State Tree, and it's a pretty fantastic way to go. I agree with her on that.
Michelle, you can make that check payable to Jamon Holmgren. So what do you got?
While we're doing audience polling of state management libraries, how many people use Relay? Okay.
I do.
Some Facebook employees raised their hand. We're pretty biased, but we've been really happy with that. So.
This is kind of just a follow-on question, and I don't mean to put you on the spot because I know that that's a mean thing to do, but why do you think that Relay hasn't caught on the way that other state management libraries have? And I'm asking that from a place where I'm actually biased because we use Relay under the hood in Gatsby. So I like it. I'm just kind of curious what you think is the
I'm
reason.
really nervous to offend the Relay team, who's not here and I'm not on it. But
We cut the cameras off.
my intuition says that we've needed to focus Relay, and most of our work has been done to make Relay support the things that we've needed at Facebook. And other state management libraries have been mostly, let's support the community and let's build this for the community, whereas Relay has been like, okay, we need this for Facebook, this is clearly valuable for everybody else. One of the things that's really cool for Relay announced at F8 was this thing that we're doing for Facebook.com, which you should watch the F8 announcement if you haven't seen that. We're rewriting Facebook.com with React, Relay, and GraphQL. And one of the cool things that's coming in Relay is called data-driven dependencies. And the problem that we're solving is you have the feed, newsfeed for Facebook.com, and there's like 100 different things that you might need to render. And GraphQL responds with like 4 of them. And that's what is in your feed. But your bundle needs to have the rendering code for all of them. That's huge. And so data-driven dependencies enables you to send down what kind of feed story this is and what JavaScript module you use to render it. And then we use that with bundle splitting to only load the ones that are necessary. And it's like way faster, smaller bundles, really cool stuff. But like that's the kind of thing that we're building in Relay because we need it for the kind of projects that we build.
That seems relevant to my interests. Okay, so this question was fed to me by Gantt Laborde, so I don't actually know what it means. Let me just read it word for word. Do you think we've finally started calming down with our navigation libraries? Anyone? No, nobody's going to touch that. I love TJ. Every time he's like, I'll do it.
I think that the community has started to solidify on something. Somebody backstage was just showing me some amazing gesture handlers that were built. And I think that's one of the pain points of navigation libraries over the years is that keeping things smooth at 60 FPS like they used to be in the old school days of iOS apps being built on Objective-C, 2012 era. I think that the solutions are coming. My perspective is essentially, I think all mobile apps need some sort of navigation structure, and so I would like there to be one solution that was driven, and that's because I've had Apple who's been doing that for me for many years, and doing that does have its trade-offs,
Anyway.
Yeah, so I think, so I actually wrote a navigation library in native code prior to adopting React Native, and it was built on the native APIs that are really good, really good. But there's still that separation between the JavaScript side and the native side that makes things a little difficult. You can't just use them directly as much as you might want to. And so the a few months ago, I tweeted, somebody talked me out of writing another navigation library. And they did. Everybody on Twitter did.
So have you noticed this coming in? Like, have you done anything with navigation as you've been building?
Not a ton, to be perfectly honest. And because I am super new, like I honestly didn't know that a large influx of navigation libraries was like a thing, which I feel like Eli the other night was like, that's actually comforting to hear. So, so yeah, it hasn't been something super on my radar. So I've kind of been like learning more about that as that question came up.
Have you run into problems with navigation libraries, or is that just kind of like a solved problem? Yeah.
I think yes, I have. I've used React Navigation, and yeah, I mean, the question is, are we settling down? I feel like we are over the past 2 years. I think it hasn't, like, it's clear, they suggest to, and so there's some direction. It might be nice to have a little bit, to have it easier for people to understand what trade-offs there are between the two. But yeah, it does feel like it's settling down, and there's still a couple of like pain points that I've experienced. So I'm looking forward to continuous improvement.
Do you have an opinion here? Is this one of those things you have to like stand to the side and go like,
We're Switzerland.
Okay, so this one, I'm hoping that somebody has a strong opinion here because y'all really let me down with the state management. So let's tee up JavaScript, TypeScript, and Reason, and just. What, no flow? Or flow. And tell us which one you prefer and why.
If I may. So I'll be the first to admit I've not used Reason, so I can't speak to that. But as a new developer, I have had the best time using JavaScript. And I think the reason for that is because with the introduction of TypeScript, if you are a newer developer, it's this whole other level of errors that you're dealing with that take you a little bit farther away from the code that you're writing because it's so focused on the types. So I think if I were trying to learn JavaScript and starting with TypeScript, it would have been very, very painful. So I really appreciate the flexibility that JavaScript gives you, particularly as a beginner. That said, now that I am working on a team and I've got bigger teams I'm working with and we're doing production work, I think having TypeScript is actually really helpful because it does give the team kind of more information about the code without actually having to physically communicate with each other about that. So from a barrier to entry level, I'm all team JavaScript, but from a yeah, you're working on a big team, yeah, TypeScript totally makes sense.
It's interesting because that's actually the path that we took. When we switched to React Native back in 2015, it was amazing. We were able to fix bugs in production almost instantly. But we were a little bit worried about the tooling at the time, and so we decided that, I miss types, I miss my compiler, and I miss types so much. But we've been on JavaScript since the early days because of the barrier to entry to TypeScript. We're actually, over the next month or two, my entire team is going to be learning TypeScript, and we'll decide as a group if that's where we want to go for the future. Our full stack web team has already switched entirely to TypeScript for the React work that they do. So bringing types into JavaScript, right now we do use Flow, but unfortunately it's not used a lot. We use it, but only a little bit.
So, no hot, come on, somebody's got to have a hot take here.
Can I make everybody mad?
Yes.
So I like TypeScript, but I like to use TypeScript with any.
So
I do not
you're an anarchist.
Yes. So I make the JavaScript people mad because I'm using TypeScript, and then I make the TypeScript people mad because I'm using any. So
Do you only use any?
That's
Same question.
That's actually the infinite red fork. It's called YOLO script.
yeah, no, so I'm happy to talk more about it afterward. I want to let other people talk.
We need to know more about
You're
this,
just going to
Jamon.
drop that bomb and put the mic down?
Okay.
Come on.
All right. So I love what TypeScript brings you from implicit types, where it's kind of detecting what you're trying to do and giving you its best guess about what's the word I'm looking for? Inference. Thank you. Yes, type inference. And so that's amazing. I converted over Gluegun, which is a library that I maintain for CLIs. I converted over to TypeScript, and just changing JS to TS gave me a whole bunch, right? That was amazing. And there's some situations where my TypeScript knowledge wasn't good enough to write the types. I didn't know how to do that, so I just write as any. And guess what? I can do JavaScript. So I can figure it out, right? Even if it's as any, I can probably figure out how to write this code. But then where TypeScript was giving me all of its benefits, it was more like some people are very much strict TypeScript only. If it's not correct, then you're not getting the benefit, and I understand that take. But I'm looking at it as this is JavaScript plus. Like I have JavaScript, now I have JavaScript plus something else, and it's bringing me closer to that ideal. So that's where I'm coming from, and I do love TypeScript though. Almost everything I'm writing these days is TypeScript.
Those are like the exact opposite trade-offs for us at Facebook. I think one of the things that people often look at TypeScript and Flow and all these kind of things is for the developer experience, being able to have autocomplete and all that. And I think Facebook's, at least the Facebook product teams that I've worked with, I can't speak, there's a lot of people who work at Facebook. We care a lot about runtime like accuracy. That if this code is typed, there are not runtime exceptions in prod. And some of the trade-offs that we've made have meant that it's been hard to get the like autocomplete and like the niceties, but we have focused a lot on that. So very different than go for the any's and embrace them.
Is anybody using Reason? Has anybody used Reason?
No, I haven't used it at all, but I definitely have a few friends who are like into Reason. Like it's kind of next level TypeScript.
This is actually what I'm starting to suspect. I don't think anybody actually does Reason. I think everybody just knows somebody who writes Reason.
So who uses Reason?
So
Do you
you're
all
the guy.
work at call stack? Facebook uses it because we build it, but I mean, I think it's a great thing to see where that's going to lead in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I'm actually very excited about Reason. I think it's really cool. I can never find anybody to like tell me what it does because they're all like, well, I haven't personally written any Reason, but it seems exciting. Which is exactly how I feel about it. Okay, so I have officially run out of questions. So at this point, I'm going to open the floor for the panelists if you have any follow-ons, because I feel like we had a lot of things that we wanted to dive into. You've been giving me the eyes.
I can go just a little bit further. I'd actually like to hear from the rest. With the introduction of the new JavaScript engine, Hermes, that's shipping bytecode. That's not shipping JavaScript, that's shipping bytecode. So does that mean that now we can just, like write compilers for a bunch of different languages and use whatever we want?
What is this Hermes thing? I think we're focused on JavaScript. We're not planning on doing anything other than that. But making JavaScript and all of your apps fast without having you needing to make changes is kind of the goal there.
That's the sound of an NDA in action.
That's the sound of the entire Hermes team sitting here looking at me being like, I don't know what you're going to say.
She's like, dude, don't do... All right, so with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much to the panelists for coming out. We really appreciate being here.